Hello, BookTube. I had an appointment bitterly early this morning in downtown Boston, and it fetched me up very close to the Brattle Bookshop, which is also in downtown Boston. It's a used bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston, right down the street from Boston Common, that has 3 stories, 3 floors of great used books, and an outdoor sale lot full of thousands more books for dirt cheap. And for the first time in a long time, my bitterly early morning appointment went fairly well. Also had a wonderful moment where a doctor who's fairly new to me gave me the priceless line: the more I read your test results, the less certain I am that you're completely human. He's young. I referred him to my anonymized case file at Mass General. That's hours and hours of fascinating reading for him. But I had a smile on my face when I left my appointment, which is great and rare. So I went to the Brattle Bookshop to treat myself. And I got a bunch of books that I want to show you. But first, we'll start with something I didn't get at the Brattle. This was waiting for me when I get back. It's another mail package. We'll open this one and see, just so I'm not staring at it until tomorrow. What have we got here? Okay, this is a finished copy of something that comes out at the end of October from Yale University Press. This is Laura Turnbridge's book, Beethoven, A Life in 9 Pieces, with a fractured cover like that. A new biography published for the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth. In this book, Oxford scholar Laura Tunbridge offers an alternative history of Beethoven's career, placing his music in context that shed light on why particular pieces are valued more than others, and what this tells us about his larger-than-life reputation. Each chapter focuses on a period of his life, a piece of music, and a revealing theme, from family to friends, from heroism to liberty. Interesting. So if you had to guess, what would the 9 pieces be? If you had to guess ahead of time, I wonder if they're gonna be listed. They are listed. If you had to guess, what would they be? Unbelievable. Okay, there's only one symphony listed here, and it's the third. It's the Eroica. Not the fifth, and not the ninth. Only one, the third. Wow. Okay, that is weird. The Kreutzer Sonata is in here, the Choral Fantasy, Fidelio, the Hammerklavier, Missa Solemnis. Boy, I would not have picked these 9. Well, anyway, we'll see. The author picked them, so she must have something to tell me about them. All right, so that's the new book. That was waiting for me. But now we'll do the old books. And we'll start off with some mass market paperbacks, including this one, which I do not need. I only got it because of its format. I have a kind of a sweet tooth for this particular format. These old Bantam classics that have that design, that sigil up at the top. This is Billy Budd and Other Stories. The totally predictable table of contents. It's Billy Budd, it's Benito Cereno, it's Bartleby. And I got this because I just have a sweet spot for this old design of Bantam class. I have talk about Melville. This is the Moby Dick, but it's the same thing. I have a little shelf of these things. I saw this and grabbed it. It was only $1, and it's possible that I could reread a couple of those short stories right away. I think I know them well enough by heart so that I don't need to. But then there were some biographies. I found some mass market paperback biographies, so you know that these are older books, because that doesn't happen anymore. Like this one, I have read this a couple of times, but I think it's time for me to give it another try. And this is by Antonia Fraser, who's Mary Queen of Scots I just love. Also, she wrote a biography much later, many decades after Mary Queen of Scots, about Marie Antoinette, that I also really like. This is her biography of Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell. And I hate Cromwell. He's a figure in history that I viscerally hate. And I hate biographies that don't call him out for what he was, that treat him as a hero. And the UK title of this book was Our First of Men. And the American book design is to look like Mary Queen of Scots. So it doesn't have that title, but nevertheless, it's a little bit on the adulatory side. At least so I remember. I haven't read this in decades. So I'm going to give this another try. I will reinforce this mass market and just read that. Then another mass market. This is something that I have read. This is by Philip Knightley and Colin Simpson. I will gladly read it again. It belongs on my library shelf no matter when I get back to it. It's Lawrence of Arabia, The Secret Lives of Lawrence of Arabia, and it's a hatchet job. on Lawrence of Arabia, of a type that was very popular in the era of the men who taught these two. In the 1930s, it was very popular to debunk Lawrence of Arabia, and that they just caught the virus. I grabbed this because of the back copy here. Archaeologist, author, savant, soldier, intimate of poets and kings, an intellectual who was also a man of action, or pathological liar, homosexual, Irish nobody, traitor, a foreign office lackey in fancy dress. Which will it be? So probably worthless as a work of history or biography, but still fun to read. And lastly, this thing, which I'm so happy to find. I have read about this so many times. This is Richard Lupoff, who is a science fiction author. He's one of those people where I'm tempted in a Brattle hall to say that he's dead, but I don't know that for a fact. If he's alive, he's very old. But this is his first book. He's known for his science fiction books like Circumpolar, but this is the first book that he ever wrote. And it's a work of nonfiction, and it's a work of nonfiction that I have wanted to have. It's Edgar Rice Burroughs' Master of Adventure. And it's a book all about Burroughs' working life. There's an enormous 2-volume biography of Edgar Rice Burroughs that is really definitive, and it's done in a 2-volume oversized slipcase box set that I wish I had. I don't have that work. But this is the kind of treatment of Burroughs that I think almost suits him better. This is all about his writing. What are the nuts and bolts of the stories? How much did he get paid? How long did he work on them? When was he commissioned? What did he think of it? And a little bit less about, what kind of a rocking horse he had when he was 8. This paperback is illustrated all throughout. It's got illustrations. Lupoff is in a better position than a lot of people. Look at that. Wow. The land that time forgot. Look at that. Those two creatures fighting each other. Lupoff's in a better position than a lot of people to write about Burroughs because he actually was one of Burroughs' editors a million years ago. There's David Innes in Pellucidar. This is a nuts and bolts book. It's really a writer biography rather than just a soup to nuts life. And I was so happy to find it in a little mass market paperback. That's terrific. And to stick with science fiction just for a bit here, we have Gordon Dickson. This is the Dorsai Companion. This is a trade paperback that collects his Dorsai short stories and also a short novel, Lost Dorsai, which was printed. I forget who printed it, but the publisher, Dickson's publisher at the time, 50 years ago, printed Lost Dorsai as a standalone novel. And the reason they were able to do that is because it was so heavily illustrated that it filled out the pages. But it works just, if you take the illustrations out, it works just fine as a novella. And this has an introduction by Dickson. It also has, if I remember correctly, this is Dickson's science fiction world, the different planets in the child cycle, which he called the child cycle, and the worlds and what they're like, and also a timeline of what happens over decades in the child cycle, the heart of which is the world Dorsai, which is a barren and fruitless place that has no exports except its people. Its people are mercenaries. They are great warriors, great fighters. They're almost genetically engineered to be better fighters and better tacticians than anyone else in the settled worlds. So they are, if you are a wealthy planet exporting grain or agriculture or technological experience, and you need an army, you will hire a Dorsai army if you can, or at least a Dorsai commander. And this, I'm sure, is going to be bittersweet because a couple of these short stories are absolutely fantastic, and Lost Dorsai is a fantastic novella. But it's going to be bittersweet because Gordon Dickson lost his way as a writer. His books got longer and longer and less readable. And that's a terrible shame because they need not have been. If he had stuck with the pure entertainment value of the Dorsai books, you can load them with all kinds of literary subtext if you want, but if you lose the entertainment value, you're no longer writing science fiction. And he did, and so his things ended up being boring, starting with the final encyclopedia, but then it went on and on from there. And that's a shame. That is really a shame. And there's also, I think this volume also has Sandra Meisel, Miesel, was a graduate student who latched onto him and started making graduate theories about his work. Deadly, absolutely deadly to a writer. But there's a poem about the Dorsai and how dangerous they can be if you cross them, that I wanted to read here. I've read it to you before, but I wanted to read it again. Yes, it's about a battalion of Dorsai that were sent to a city and hired by the leaders of the city to conduct an expedition. And when the expedition was finished, the leaders of the city tried to welch on their mercenary army and hanged its captain with disastrous results. I want to read you that poem because it's just, I can't ever get close to this without reading it. 1/4 of Rochemont's fighting strength, 1 battalion of Dorsai, were sent by Rochemont forth alone to bleed Helmuth and die. But look down from Rochemont's height upon the Helmuth plain at all the Helmuth's armored force by Dorsai checked or slain. Meaning, the leaders of the town were thinking, we will get our money's worth out of our Dorsai battalion because we will hurt our enemy, but we won't have to pay them because they'll all die. They're drastically outnumbered. But it didn't happen that way, as it never does when you hire the Dorsai. Look down on Rochemont's shame. To hide the wrong she'd done, made claim Helmuth had bribed Dorsais. No battle had been won. To prove that lie, the Rochemont lords arrested Jacques Chrétien. On charge he dealt with Helmuth's chiefs to pay for payment to his men. Commandant van Arp van Din sent word, you may not judge Dorsai. Return our colonel by the dawn, or Rochemont town will die. Strong held behind her walls, Rochemont scorned to answer them, condemned and at daybreak hanged young Colonel Jacques Chrétien. Bright the sun that morning shone upon each weaponed wall, but when the sun set in the west, those walls were leveled all. Then soft and white the moon arose on streets and roofs unstained, but when the moon was down once more, no street nor roof remained. No more is there a Rochemont town, nor are Rochemont's men, but stands a Dorsai monument to Colonel Jacques Chrétien. So pass the word from world to world, alone still stands Dorsai. But while she lives, not one of hers by foreign wrong shall die. They little knew of brotherhood, the faith of fighting men, when once to prove their lie was good, hanged Colonel Jacques Chrétien. And the non-Dorsai characters in the Dorsai books constantly make reference to the fact that if the assembled members of the Dorsai world were to pull into their own world and fortify it, they could defeat the rest of the combined militaries of the settled worlds. It's going to be great to read these stories again, and I don't know that Dorsai Companion exists in any other form. So the short stuff of the Dorsai, a story called Brothers, a story called Amanda Morgan, a story called Warrior, even Lost Dorsai I'll read again. And I often think they're better than a lot of the longer Dorsai works. The only longer Dorsai work that I think really works, stands out as a science fiction novel, is a novel called Soldier Ask Not. But maybe it's time I reread a lot of them just to see. Then we have a book that's fairly new. It was one of those books that I got. I got it as an advance copy. I got it as a finished copy. I read it. I gave my feedback to the author and to the publisher. I don't think I wrote a review of it, but it was one of those new books that I got rid of it. It went straight through the process, but some of them stick with you and you wish you hadn't got rid of them. So when I saw this in a paperback, I grabbed it. It's The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. And I remember it being terrific. So I'm fascinated by books about this kind of subject, about this new phenomenon in our midst, relatively new, what the internet is doing to society and to ourselves. I remember this being really good on that subject, so I'm glad to have it now. I'll put it in with new books. Then we have a book that's going to go here. It's going to go on this bookcase of books about books. It's a collection of literary pieces by a politician, by Augustine Burroughs. This is Etc., a collection. I believe this was the last such thing that he did. He struck a vein of these literary occasional pieces with a book called Obiter Dicta. He did that, and then he did another one of those, and he did a few more like that. I think this was the last one that he did, and may have been the last thing that he published. He had a memoir that was published posthumously, but I think this may have been the last thing that he wrote for publication. He was a politician, deeply involved in the affairs of Ireland. But he was also a literary person, and his literary books, I have one other. I have Obiter Dicta, and I'd gladly add this. This is the dust jacket is still on this thing, amazingly. This is from, it has to be, what, the 1930s? Maybe even earlier than that. When are you from? 1930, the year 1930. so I will reinforce this and gladly read it. He has essays in here on all sorts of literary matters. What have we got? George Whitefield, John Bunyan, John Wycliffe, Sir Walter Scott. There's one essay in here called Boswell Disrobed, with an exclamation point. That'd be worth it alone. Also, his essay on Nathaniel Hawthorne, I don't think I've ever read. So this will be fascinating to read, and it'll go in here. It's one of the only books I got that I know will come in here. Then we have his generation's David McCullough, a great popular historian. This is Thomas Fleming, and this is the Beat the Last Drum, which is about Yorktown. It's about what many people a little bit inaccurately refer to as the military end of the American Revolution, when Cornwallis was forced to surrender. This is the long history of all that, and then a minute-by-minute reconstruction of that time of Yorktown itself, by an author who wrote a book called Now We Are Enemies, about the Bunker Hill and the beginning of the American Revolution, and who's really good. Thomas Fleming is really good. He's really, really readable. So I don't have this. I haven't read it in a million years, so I will reinforce the dust jacket, which is very pretty. The dust jacket is still, the spine has seen better days, but look at the front cover is still the way it looked when it was made. And it goes on my burgeoning American Revolution history shelf. It's actually much more than one shelf now. My American Revolution section has expanded enormously. That's great. And then another one this connects with, the other day, I think yesterday, we talked about O Pioneers by Willa Cather. Or no, it was 2 days ago. We talked about O Pioneers by Willa Cather, and she dedicated that book to Sarah Orne Jewett, her friend and mentor, Sarah Orne Jewett, another great 19th century writer who took ordinary life and ordinary people, the rhythms of ordinary society, as her subject. And I was thinking about that. I remember in that video I was wondering, do you have a copy of that? And I don't know if I do or not. I don't know if I have in The Country of the Pointed Firs. I don't know if I have that in the Penguin Classic. I know that it exists. But I might not. I haven't looked around. I'm not looking at my penguins. But when I was at the Brattle, I saw this thing. Sarah Orne Jewett, A Writer's Life, which we're just not going to be able to see anything because of the lighting here. This came out right before the 21st century, and it's all that I want. There is our author right there. I've never read a biography of this person, so that's fantastic. And it's the kind of serendipity for which the Brattle is famous, so, or at least well known to me. So I grabbed it. I'm always happy to add a biography to the shelf. I've got a few here now. The Edgar Rice Burroughs thing I'm thrilled to have, and I will give Antonia Fraser another try with Oliver Cromwell, and we'll see if maybe she can convince me that he wasn't the devil incarnate. Then this next one is terrific. It is a fantastic book. I've had it many times and got rid of it, got it again, got rid of it, got it again. It's by John Boswell, and it's called Christianity, Social Tolerance, and Homosexuality, with the subtitle being Gay People in Western Europe from the Beginning of the Christian Era to the 14th Century. Larger size thing from the University of Chicago Press. Unfortunately, this hardcover does not have an author photo of Boswell when he wrote this book when he was still a fairly young man, and he was extremely good looking. It'd be nice just aesthetically to have that on here. And he went on to write one other and much more controversial book on medieval same-sex marriage and medieval homosexuality. It's meant to be a muckraking book, but boy, is it good. I always forget how wonderful a writer this guy is. I want to read you just a bit to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Contentious, but really, really good. Let's see here. In the particular case at issue, the belief that the hostility of the Christian scriptures to homosexuality caused Western society to turn against it should not require any elaborate refutation. The very same books which are thought to condemn homosexual acts condemn hypocrisy in the most strident terms and on the greater authority, and yet Western society did not create any social taboos against hypocrisy, did not claim that hypocrites were unnatural, did not segregate them into an oppressed minority, did not enact laws punishing their sin with castration or death. No Christian state, in fact, has passed laws against hypocrisy per se, despite its continual and explicit condemnation by Jesus and the Church. In the very same list which has been claimed to exclude from the kingdom of heaven those guilty of homosexual practices, the greedy are also excluded. Yet no medieval state burned the greedy at the stake. Obviously, some factors beyond biblical precedent were at work in late medieval states which licensed prostitutes but burned gay people. By any objective standard, there are far more objurgation of prostitution in the New Testament than of homosexuality. Biblical strictures have been employed with greater selectivity by all Christian states, and in historical context, what determines the selection is clearly the crucial issue. I think that's just fantastic. He wants to study, in this book, when ancient societies went from tolerating homosexuality in their midst to excoriating it and killing its avatars. And I think that's just fascinating. Of the various groups which became the object of intolerance in Europe during the Middle Ages, gay people are the most useful for this study for a number of reasons. Some of these are relatively obvious. Unlike Jews and Muslims, they were dispersed throughout the general population everywhere in Europe. They constituted a substantial minority in every age, rather than in a few periods like heretics or witches. But they were never, unlike the poor, for instance, more than a minority of the population. Intolerance of gay people cannot, for the most part, be confused with medical treatment, as in the case of lepers or the insane, or with protective surveillance, as in the case of the deaf or, in some societies, women. And he goes on to make a case for why it is that society began to hate homosexuality, began to stigmatize it. It makes a strong case that it has, as you mentioned, as you heard there, it makes a strong case that it does not go hand in hand with the Bible, that it goes hand in hand with other things, including church power. I haven't read this in a few years. I remember every time I do, just being blown away. I don't know why I keep getting rid of it. A little bit on the sad side that this, if the trade paperback had a picture of the author on the cover, on the back cover, but that's okay. I remember what the author looked like, so I don't need the picture. And I'll happily reread this. And then the last book for this Brattle trip is the biggest one. It was the heaviest one, but I don't think that an ebook would do this justice, at least the way ebooks are currently made. And I've been waiting to find a copy of this again, because every time I get it, I give it away. And I am now teaching myself not to do that. I am teaching myself to tell people, if you want this, I will find you a copy, rather than if you want this, I will send you my copy. So that I don't have to go on this eternal Sisyphean treadmill of constantly refinding all of the books that I love. And this is Robert Hughes. He had a mini-series. He was an art critic. He's no longer with us. I had the great privilege, the great fun of reviewing one of his last books. So I got into a critical conversation with him at least once. But he was an art critic, a great art critic. He's fantastic at doing what he does. And he had a miniseries, a television miniseries on the history of American art from its earliest beginnings all the way to the present day. And it's amazing, just amazing. It's called American Visions, and this is the book companion to it. I don't know if American Visions is available on streaming or on DVD or whatever the kids watch these days. This is incredibly illustrated all throughout. The book is just incredibly illustrated, which is another big reason to have the book. I don't know if that miniseries is available at all, but oh boy, you should watch it if it is, because he's great. He's great all throughout. Starts off the very earliest of American artwork and goes all the way to the incomprehensible present, of which he is a great interpreter. I have to admit, his book, Nothing If Not Critical, is almost entirely about artists that I think are garbage, but I wouldn't miss reading him about them for all the tea in China. So I'm very happy to have this. I don't necessarily need all of Robert Hughes, but this is one of my favorites, and I was so happy to find it for dirt cheap at the Brattle. All these are from the outside lot. So there you go. That was the Brattle trip plus a bit of mail. We have American Visions. We have Christianity, Social Tolerance, and Homosexuality, a terrible title, but I wasn't consulted. We have Sarah Owen Jewett, A Writing Life. Beat the Last Drums by Thomas Fleming. We have Etc. by Augustin Burroughs, which will go in this room. We have The Shallows, about what the internet does to your brain. The Dorsai Companion, the short Dorsai fiction of Gordon Dixon. Edgar Rice Burroughs' Master of Adventure by Dick Lupoff. We have The Secret Lives of Lawrence of Arabia, in which we finally pull the veil off and find out what he was, an Irish nobody. We have Antonia Fraser's biography of Cromwell. We'll see if I like it better this time around. And we have an old Bantam classic of Herman Melville's famous short stories. So there you go. That was our Brattle trip today. Still warm, still lovely outside, still perfect Brattle outdoor cart browsing weather. But I don't think I'm going to be back this week. I'm pretty sure that I'm not. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.